Mandated authenticity. Why succession fails less on intention and more on mandate. I want to start with a simple observation from the last month. Many successions do not fail because the family didn't want it enough, and not even because the successor lacked competence. They fail because the decision space collapsed, quietly, step by step, until the company can no longer continue on its own terms. And then that happens. The outcome is rarely a heroic turnaround. More often, it becomes a forced sale, a rushed restructuring, or a slow shutdown dressed up as strategy. Today, I want to give you a practical lens for this. I researched mandated authenticity and how mandate is built, protected, or lost across the ecosystems around a family firm. In Germany, and honestly in many mature economies, companies are cooperating under a mix of pressures that interact. Costs, skill shortages, regulations density, financing conservatism, geopolitical uncertainty, and a media environment that punishes nuance. In that kind of environment, it is not enough to say we have a great successor or we hired an excellent external CEO or we adopt AI to scale communication. What is really happening is that the firm is delegating its voice and identity claims. It's saying this person or this system speaks for us. This person or the systems represents our future. And what is not validated in the boardroom alone, it is validated by the ecosystem. So here's my core claim. Succession is no longer primarily a family decision. It is an ecosystem authorization process. The core idea is, let me define mandated authenticity in plain language. I use mandated authenticity to describe the moment then a firm needs to prove that a person or a tool speaking for its is not only competent but authorized to speak in a way stakeholders accept as legitimate and responsible. If that authorization is missing, you get one or two failure modes. First, performance without permission. The successor moves fast, changes things quickly, and stakeholders push back, not because they hate change, but because they didn't authorize it yet. Second, permissions without performance. The successor tries to please everyone, preserve legitimacy at all costs, and the company becomes strategically paralyzed. The solution is not be nicer or be tougher. The solution is govern the delegation. To keep this tangible, I use a simple logic I call MSTM. Mechanism first, the routines that reduce ambiguity. How decisions are made, challenged and closed. Second, structure. Formal roles, governance bodies, reporting lines, decision rights. Third, trust, the relational substrate that makes mechanisms and structure usable. And last but not least, mandate, the socially authorized right to act, internally and externally. Here's the important part. The mandate is not given. It's earned, renewed, and renegotiated, especially during leadership transition. So, when someone asks me, why did that succession fail? The CEO was great. My answer is often, because the mandate collapsed. Now I'll make that real in 3 examples. First example, the external CEO was perfect and he still failed. Why? Imagine a mid-sized family-owned manufacturing firm. The family appoints an external CEO. Strong CV, industry experience, clear plan. Everyone says, finally professionalization. The CEO arrives and does what good managers do. Cuts complexity, introduce reportings, discipline, change suppliers, and changes legacy product lines. And then, within months, resistance escalates. Key middle managers block, the works council becomes defensive, long-standing out customers complain about tone and service changes, and the bank starts asking sharper questions. The family says, why are they resisting? This is rational. But if I map it to my MSTM model, the problem is obvious. Structure changed faster than trust could carry it, and mechanisms were introduced before legitimacy was built. The CEO had formal authority, but the ecosystems hadn't authorized the identity claim. This person represents the continuation of our firm. Practical fix. I do 3 things. I separate formal appointment from social authorization. Second, I define a 100-day mandate contract that will change what will not and what must be co-decided. And third, I run a stakeholder sequence. Employees, top customers, banks, suppliers, each need a different legitimacy proof. Because mandate is not one audience, it's a portfolio. Let's come to the second example. AI in communication. And it also works without succession, when delegated voice backfires. Now, imagine a complete different scenario. A family firm adopts generative AI for customer-facing communication. Marketing text, sales outreach, employer branding, even public statements. The intention is good. Speed, efficiency, consistency. But then, sometimes subtle happens. Customers feel a creditable gap. This doesn't sound like them. Employers feel uneasy. Are they outsourcing our identity? Journalists or community stakeholders sense inauthenticity. This is not a tech problem. It's a governance problem. Because the company didn't just adopt the tool, it delegated their voice to AI. So the relevant question becomes, who is accountable for what AI says? As the firm, what are the guardrails? What is approval workflow? What is the escalation path? Then it goes wrong. My practical fix for that is, I could recommend an authenticity mandate for delegated voice. One accountable owner, explicit boundaries, a human review gate for high impact outputs, and a clear standard what the firm will never automate, especially in the sensitive stakeholder context. Again, mandate, not hype. And last but not least, I want to give you a third example, a restructuring case. The continuation becomes a structural selection. In this example, a traditional industrial family firm enters a severe downturn. Insolvency risk rises, options narrow. Suddenly the question is no longer who should succeed, but can we continue at all? This is where we often see structural selection. Financing gets conservative exactly when the investment is needed. Skills become scarce exactly when the transformation requires capability building, and regulation density increases exactly when speed matters. In that environment, continuation is not a moral preference, it's a design problem. And here's the uncomfortable question I keep asking. Are we building frameworks that enlarge decision space for responsible continuation? Or are we accelerating selection without admitting it? My practical fix for that is, I insist on an explicit decision space diagnosis. Before any solution, what is the binding constraint right now? Liquidity orders, talent governance, conflict, bank, governance, or narrative collapse. When I design interventions that expand options, sometimes through short-term stabilization, sometimes through governance redesign, sometimes through a renegotiation of the mandate, the lenders and key stakeholders. In real restructurings, survival is often a sequence of mandate renewals. When I say ecosystems, I mean the layers that authorize or block continuation. First, it's the internal owners, boards, leadership team, workforce. Second, the market, customer, competitors, supply chain, labor market. And third, we're talking about the institutional, banks, investors, courts, regulators, unions, chambers. And fourth, the narrative, media, community, industry, identity, what the firm stands for. Fifth, geopolitical, trade regions, China, tariffs, energy. A successor can be strong inside the firm and still fail if the institutional layer, like the bank, or the narrative layer, like public credibility, withdraws authorization. This is why linear thinking fails. The system loops. Just to give you some Monday morning actions, what you can do, let me end with a short checklist you can actually use. First of all, if you're an owner or a board member, just do 3 things. Wrote down the mandate statement in 1 paragraph. What are we authorizing the successor to do now, and what requires renegotiation? Second, map decision rights on 1 page. Who can decide? Who can veto? Who can delay? If I can't answer that, I don't have structure, only hope. And third, track early mandate signals. Decision execution speed, talent retention, customer confidence, convenient behavior, and whether internal narrative coherence improves or fragments. Second, if your successor, family or external, doesn't matter, you should focus on sequence, not ego. Start with legitimacy before transformation. Choose early wins that reduce stakeholder pain, not early wins that satisfy my identity as the new leader. Communicate what stays, what changes, and why now. Third, if you're an advisor, banker, investor, or just the ecosystem actor, ask yourself one uncomfortable question. Where am I punishing learning? If every deviation triggers sanctions, I incentivize superficial compliance and late-stage collapse. Responsible continuation needs bounded experimentation, governed, measured, but possible. I don't believe everything is getting worse. I also don't believe shallow optimism helps. What I do see is a system that can unintentionally shrink decision space until continuation becomes a privilege of the strongest players. That's why I care about mandated authenticity, because mandate is the infrastructure of renewal. If you are in this ecosystem, owner, board member, successor, banker, investor, advisor, here's my question for you. What is one change you can make this quarter that enlarges decision space instead of shrinking it? If you want to share your thoughts in the comments, especially if you've been mandate collapse or mandate renewal in real succession or restructuring situations. And if you'd like more of these research-backed, practice-oriented frameworks, follow and subscribe. I'll keep comparing notes. Would be my pleasure.